Silent Hill Alchemilla is a fan project created by developer White Noise Team, a mod utilizing the Source engine in an attempt to recapture the atmosphere of Silent Hill, but in their own unique and creative take. An original story that follows its own protagonists and the horrors that are left to be unveiled in iconic locations that revisit series past, that would immediately capture any fan's attention. To say White Noise Team took such creative liberties in fleshing out their visual flair in order to embody the atmosphere of the town of Silent Hill by crafting something new yet familiar is an understatement. Much of that inspiration is adopted into the story and gameplay of Silent Hill Alchemilla, and it's done flawlessly. From the beginning, as you wake up in your bedroom to venture in the home that you stay in, you can immediately feel the soft and mellow ambience that you expect to find in any Silent Hill game. You feel safe and comfortable, but have that lingering dread that something is off, and that will only get progressively worse from here on out. An expectation we all inhibit from not just Silent Hill, but any horror game. This isn't done in a haste, but rather built up slowly, giving context clues by reading documents that gives insight into the lore that the developers built in that pertains to the protagonist, or interaction with the environment where the player gets the implication that something is more than it seems, by solely the dialogue the protagonist conveys. Little overlooked yet important details that play a contribution to building up this atmosphere. From mere speculation of the gameplay, the player can come to find that this game is purely first person. This may remind you of the Room 302 sequences while roaming the apartment, which also adopts the same camera angle. While obviously not intentional, it is a nice change of pace to interact with the environment in a new perspective than the aforementioned third-person fixed camera angle that you would typically find in a Silent Hill game. It feels more grounded and immersed in this horrifying environment that takes much influence from the likes of Silent Hill and the other world with locations such as Alchemilla Hospital, Silent Hill 2 in the apartments, or Silent Hill 3 in the mall center. Previous places that we all have visited that feel familiar, yet completely new and different, that can throw us off and make us reflect and think as how to proceed forward in this new lens. Much of the gameplay features interactivity with the environment, conducting such puzzles that will make you ponder and use much of your knowledge as to how to solve a certain puzzle in particular. This game makes it abundantly clear that much of your time will be exploration in these environments, yet will be utilizing puzzles as the sole foundation that creates much of the value that comes from the gameplay. Much of the puzzles can really make you think, such as the puzzle in Alchemilla Hospital, where you have to read memos to gain an understanding of a series of patterns that to be applied in a mathematical equation by problem solving. After doing the math, you can unlock a door that was previously inaccessible. This is not to say that all of the puzzles are predominant on this setup alone, rather to clarify that continuation to a new area will feature a catalyst of different puzzles to solve that will really mandate the player to think. It can be a hit or miss regarding how this feature of puzzles can be either a warm welcome to those who love the process of elimination, or a solution that really makes one think for an extensive amount of time and get that reward for achieving a problem that you are thinking upon minutes, if not over an hour. And there's the majority, like myself, who like a good puzzle every now and then, but feel overwhelmed and exhausted after spending lots of time solving it and then finding a plethora of puzzles right after the last one. It may come off to you that something feels off, something that you may have expected to find but not questioned until I brought it up. That question in particular: where are the monsters? A valid question that I myself even questioned early on in gameplay once I got to the other world, Alchemilla Hospital. One of the central and core elements that lay the foundation for Silent Hill, and not just its gameplay, but also providing that immersion into the atmosphere of Silent Hill as a whole, is left out. A sentiment that left me perplexed and pretty dumbfounded, to say the least, to find not remotely any monsters nor combat to be featured in this game. Without the enemies roaming the linear halls that we find ourselves enclosed in, it feels like much of the horror atmosphere is cracked a bit, because that sense of danger is non-existent. Utilizing such limited resources with your weapons, first aid, and other miscellaneous items is what gave that frantic gameplay that would always have the player on their feet. This allowed us to problem solve with scenarios we would play in our heads to see what outcome we would come up with that leads to a resolution. By trial and error, we come to learn from our mistakes, and unfortunately, that danger, that fear, is lost here. But to the developer's credit, They did go out and say that the implementation of enemies was not a creative decision, but rather a forced one that they had to resort to as the development time of this game had already been long enough, going on for years. Finding a developer who could help pitch in with such gameplay elements was too late and had to be shelved. It's a shame, but one that I can understand and empathize with, as game development, especially from an indie developer, is quite an extensive process that takes months to get down correctly. But even though that core feature doesn't pertain, there is the horror that makes the world of Silent Hill El Camilla. The horror is nothing short of phenomenal. This perfectly captures the Silent Hill aesthetic we have all come to memorize by the surreal environments that leave the setting grim and decrepit, encapsulating that mood that populates each entry that feels familiar yet unique, and distinguished to give its own identity. El Camilla Hospital is abandoned, isolated, and lonely, leaving only the player to themselves to roam the empty liminal halls of each floor to find sections blocked off, rooms that give the impression that someone used to be here, or how the environment feels like it conveys a story without any dialogue or explanation. These are just intricate details that incentivize the player to want to understand everything. It's not only seen here, but in other places you visit in Silent Hill. Green Lion Antique Shop contorts and corrupts the labyrinth that messes with your head. The mall center creates this dark atmosphere as a reflection of a populated area with sound and life. Is left empty with nothing but hollowness. Only our footsteps can fill in the void. And above all, our own home. A home in which we once had a family to create memories in is revealed to be an illusion by our own doing. A revelation that undoes everything that we strive to solve and uncover to get an answer that would give us hope. But in reality, it is only a lie to ourselves. In true psychological horror fashion, much of that is captured here with the protagonist, seeing the progression of this vengeful, yet hopeful man who blames Dr. Kaufman, a prominent character in Silent Hill, who manufactured and provided the drugs to Norman Wexler, the protagonist we've been playing as. Yet to uncover later on that the build-up to this payoff subverts our expectations, with Norman to be revealed as the one who killed his family. A devastating revelation that fuels that trauma, grief, and tragedy that would make anyone go insane to learn about once again. All of this comes crumbling down the further you progress up until you reach El Camilla Hospital for the last time. The environment is not grotesque, with flesh plaguing the walls and floors, becoming more and more eroded the more you dive deeper into the mental state of Norman, a reflection of himself, as mirrors play a recurring theme throughout the game, a reflection of his inner self that is nothing but hatred, disgust, and sorrow. Previously seen environments that we once saw in fragmented pieces are now collected and restored as memories that were left forgotten for a reason. The ending to all of this is bleak, as Norman comes to find the family car that he drove his family and killed all of them in by stepping into the driver's seat to watch himself suffocate underwater as he drowns, only to wake up in his bedroom as if this was all another nightmare. But it's anything but that. Leaving his room, he finds El Camilla once again, a repeating time loop of the horrors he once faced that he must continue to repeat all over again. A nightmare that will never end.
No one will save me. I'll just stay here.
Silent Hill El Camilla is one of the most fascinating mods I have ever experienced. Even though I have mixed thoughts about the gameplay, I did find that most of my experience was enjoyable all the way through. The developers didn't take pre-existing assets or materials to copy and paste them to call it a day. They utilized what they had from scratch and used the resources to create and craft something new and unique that tells their own story. They didn't try to make a profound statement by creating a Silent Hill Konami couldn't make for over a decade, or make this project out of spite for the mishandled state that the franchise is left in. If anything, this is a love letter to Silent Hill, one that is worth experiencing. If you are interested in playing Silent Hill El Camilla, I'll be leaving a link in the description below to the mod page, which will give you more information on the game itself. You will need Half-Life 2 as this is a source engine mod, but it's about $10 and fairly cheap to buy. It is even better on sale for only $1. I highly recommend playing this mod if you get the chance, as it pays tribute to Silent Hill by respecting the material and the franchise itself. It gives that authentic experience Silent Hill fans have been craving for years. Have you ever thought to yourself, what if we did get a Silent Hill 1 as a remake instead of Silent Hill 2 remake? Well, luckily for those who were severely disappointed, we did get a chance to see what Silent Hill 1 could look like as a remake. A fully interactive and playable demo of the beginning introduction to Silent Hill 1. In gameplay, we get a first-person perspective of Harry driving in his Jeep along with Cheryl in the passenger seat. You can also hear the main theme, Silent Hill, playing in the background as if Harry is listening to the song on the radio. It eventually shows Sybil driving on her motorcycle and driving off into the night, which comes to an end when Harry crashes into a lesser spiritual manifestation, as expected, kicking off the events of the game. Once Harry awakens from the car crash, you are fully immersed in the foggy town of Silent Hill. It's honestly so bizarre to see the beginning in the first-person perspective since we are accustomed to the third-person camera angle. Having this shift in perspective changes how we see the general surroundings in such a drastic way. You yourself feel like you are in the role of Harry Mason, wandering aimlessly through this thick fog that obscures everything around you, forcing you to venture into the unknown of this lonely, isolated little town. However, I will say that you aren't allowed to explore all of it as it locks the player out from entering out of bounds with an invisible wall, so there aren't many options, unfortunately, to explore at your own leisure. You eventually follow the same path you recognize by memory to find Cheryl and chase after her, running through the neighborhood in this long liminal street, then stumble upon the back alleys. You hear the siren that blares its horn loudly to signify the shift to the other world, giving you the lighter as the only viable solution as a light source. The walk through this back alley feels incredibly claustrophobic because of how tight the walls feel close to each other, building this dark and foreboding atmosphere with how much depth there is in the darkness. You generally can't see anything in front of you, which creates even more of this fear and vulnerability. Finally, we find the hanged corpse on the fence with the gray child stabbing you to where you pass out, and then the demo ends. Surprisingly, it was very well done in just 10 minutes of this concept demo. It was atmospheric and immersive, from the shift of a third-person to a first-person perspective. I initially thought it was an odd decision, as most modern remakes, at least adapting classic survival horror games in the genre, still stay faithful with the third-person over-the-shoulder camera angle. But having the first-person camera angle feels more personal, creating this unsettling and creepy atmosphere that fits perfectly in Silent Hill. I have no clue if we will ever get an eventual remake of Silent Hill 1, but this is probably the closest we will ever get to one. If you thought seeing a Silent Hill 1 remake was hard to believe, then you best believe that someone went out of their way to make a Silent Hill 1 remake. What you see is a recreation of Silent Hill 1's opening, where you once again assume the role of Harry Mason, waking up in Silent Hill after his fatal car crash where he has to find Cheryl. It mostly covers the introduction, where you explore the town to roam around and eventually find yourself in the back alleys, where you get killed by the Grey Child, waking up once again in the cafe 522 with Sybil with the exact word-for-word dialogue you'd find in the original game, and explore the town once more to find Cheryl's whereabouts. In terms of gameplay, there isn't much depth as you should expect, since the gameplay controls are very limited, and the same applies to the limitations of the Game Boy's hardware as well. But given what the developer HPL_Ben used when it came to adapting the gameplay mechanics, it's faithful to say the least. After Sybil gives you the pistol, you go through the scripted cutscene with the air screamer, killing it upon receiving the pocket radio. You can also save your game and collect health items if you want, although it's pretty mundane, as for one, the game never explains how to use health or if there is an inventory screen you can go to check your items. And two, it's a 10-minute demo that is very short and not at all difficult. Once in town, you basically just roam down the streets to kill the occasional air screamer and groaner with a pistol, which isn't difficult as you have unlimited ammo in your pistol. Eventually, you find the key to the doghouse and then go into the house where the demo ends. Again, I want to not repeat myself like a broken record, but the demo is fairly short and mostly a concept of what a Silent Hill 1 could look like on the Game Boy, and the essence of a remake. It's a neat idea, and I can't wait to show you the many remakes fans have made along the way. As opposed to the previous Silent Hill 1 remake, this is a fully playable recreation of the original Silent Hill 2, made specifically for the Game Boy. I am not joking when I say this. The developer in question, Stormer Games, took it upon himself to recreate the entirety of Silent Hill 2 because he was experimenting with Game Boy Studio, a free-to-download program that allows you to build and create your own Game Boy game, and he decided, on a whim, to remake Silent Hill 2. Surprisingly, this went under the radar for me because I honestly had no idea this even existed until I did research on this video. Apparently, the development started partially because of Silent Hill 2's 20th anniversary, but mostly due in part to not having his PS2 to play Silent Hill 2 for himself. So he decided to make a Game Boy version of it for him and others to enjoy for free. He had to watch walkthroughs to recreate everything you see from scratch. Honestly, he did such an outstanding job at capturing every meticulous detail down to the core that is seen in the original game, such as the opening scene of James's monologue where he recites Mary's letter. The music that accompanies it, although compressed due to the Game Boy's hardware limitations, sounds authentic to the original music piece. You also have an inventory that incorporates everything when it comes to the items that you use throughout the game, such as health, weapons, miscellaneous items, etc. Furthermore, you eventually come to find that even the cutscenes play exactly how you expect them to, just in an 8-bit art style with the dialogue reciting word for word what the characters say to each other, such as James meeting Angela for the first time in the cemetery, or when James stumbles into the town of Silent Hill to find the lying figure, creating this tension with the slow build-up to the eventual resolution where you end up fighting it. Obviously, it doesn't have that same execution you'd experience in the original game, but the amount of creativity expressed here with such limitations to incorporate that similar experience is something I appreciate in its detail. There is lots of depth within each environment you see throughout this remake, and it's honestly hard to believe that Konami themselves didn't develop this, let alone one person. It's believable enough to envision this in an alternate timeline where Silent Hill 2 wasn't just ported to the Xbox and PC, but also to the Game Boy. I could see myself in my youth as a kid, going on a road trip with my family and deciding to take a Game Boy with me and play all of Silent Hill 2 for the long road ahead. Truly, this is a phenomenal remake that I can't stop thinking about, even as I'm writing this script. It just makes me want to replay it once again. That's how great it is. I would love to talk more about this little hidden gem, but I'm gonna leave it to you to play it and experience it yourself. Also, Pyramid alone is worth playing this. He looks so derpy and adorable. I love it. Silent Hill 3 is yet another remake, although this time, not in the graphical art style of a Game Boy, but rather reminiscent of a Flash game from the early to late 2000s. It's very basic at best when it comes to its overall controls. Simply use the A or D keys to move header left or right, and hold down the left mouse button to fire the Uzi machine gun. That's all there really is to this minimalistic gameplay design. But I would be lying to you if it didn't invoke a little nostalgia into me, or reminded me of when I was a little kid, wasting half of my day by going onto the family laptop to play these 2D Flash games. The pixel art seen here is surprisingly very well done. It captures, to its best efforts, the environments seen in Silent Hill 3, such as the Nightmare Amusement Park, the mall, the subway station, and finally, the town of Silent Hill. You can tell that the developer knew what they were doing and making the best out of their efforts to realize the atmosphere into a 2D Flash game. The designs for the Numbody and the Doublehead look spot on, with the details in their pixel art. This Robbie the Rabbit that you typically see upon starting the game that sits there dead on the bench gives this sense of an ominous presence. The same is captured here with Robbie's pixel art, although it's more unsettling to me. Heather's pixel artwork shows signs of wear and lack of polish compared to the rest of the designs seen in the gameplay. It's decent at best, but it's more than made up for the fact that you're equipped with the Uzi and just relentlessly spraying the enemies with bullets. It's purely a filler game that is meant to capture the atmosphere of Silent Hill 3, albeit condensed into a 5-minute flash game to waste your time with until you get bored. It's nothing too complex in terms of adapting an actual remake for a pre-existing console, like the Game Boy remakes before it, but it has charm and passion instilled into it. Possibly one of the most bizarre fan games on the list has got to be Silent Hill 2.5. This fan game is very similar to the Silent Hill remake concept demo, as you have a first-person perspective while in gameplay. The difference here is that you have all the freedom to explore Silent Hill, at least from what I played, the first half of Southdale. Silent Hill 2.5 sees the player play as Heather Mason. According to the synopsis, this takes place directly after Silent Hill 3, where Heather ends up coming back to Silent Hill once again to meet up with James Sunderland. While here, the player is tasked to roam around the foggy town to collect 6 of the Robbie the Rabbit bunnies placed in separate locations across the town. While exploring, you have to avoid the enemies from Silent Hill 3, which comprise the Closer, Doublehead, and the Numbody. As you collect each Robbie the Rabbit, the difficulty will increase as the quantity of the enemies will see more spawn, growing in numbers, and the day will slowly get darker, which makes navigation more difficult to progress. You also, for some reason, have these player stats that correlate to your health, stamina, and the amount of time you have left remaining. This was by far the weirdest decision to put into the gameplay. The health, I understand, as it's only common knowledge in any survival horror game, or really, any video game in general. But as to why there is a stamina meter and a time limit, it is beyond me. I suppose this is here to increase the difficulty that will handicap the player if they don't learn to evade the enemies, or learn the map layout to navigate properly so they have a higher chance of finding the Robbie the Rabbit and not running out of time. But here's the problem. For some unknown reason, the controls are bizarrely mishandled in terms of their assigning to the keyboard layout. When you move around with the keyboard and mouse, you typically use the A, S, D, F keys to move and the mouse to look around. The mouse is fine when it comes to looking around the environment, but the movement is assigned incorrectly to the arrow keys, which are on the right side of the keyboard. To make matters worse, there isn't an option in the menu to properly configure your control bindings for some reason. So throughout the entire playthrough, I had to awkwardly have both of my hands side by side when using the mouse and keyboard controls. I'm embarrassed to say that it took me an hour to figure out how to navigate around the town to find all 6 of the Robbie the Rabbit bunnies. I felt like I knew the entire town layout like the back of my hand as I played Silent Hill 2 many times before. But after numerous deaths, I guess this isn't the case. I will argue that the timer doesn't help progression in making it easier to finish, as its time limit is too low. Under 2 minutes to have the accessibility to traverse around, as well as the awkward tight spaces you come to find while in the alleys, where you then have this haunting image of an army of Silent Hill 3 monsters walking menacingly towards you. But somehow, after an hour of playtime in what should be a short demo, I finally found all of the Robbie the Rabbit bunnies. After this happens, the memory of Alessa character model spawns, which is supposed to be a guide of sorts to the player, I'm assuming. But in the most anticlimactic turns of events, through the gate, you find a wall blocking you from passing into the tunnel. All you get is a word of text that reads, "Door next town leads to test 3 spawn_1. Which left me dumbfounded. This means that I wasted an hour trying to finish the fan game, which led to what I'm assuming is a work in progress portion of the fan game, which isn't in this update. After doing more investigation into the fan game, I noticed that it hadn't been updated since 2015, making that almost a decade of inactivity a year from now. It's safe to say that it looks like this fan game won't be getting a proper update anytime soon. However, there are devlogs showing footage of the developer playing in other areas of the town, such as the forest, after leaving the observatory deck, which would then lead to the cemetery, Read Me Angela. It seems that they probably ported the entire map from the PS2 somehow, which is technical wizardry in itself, that I don't understand. There is also VR support, that allows you to experience the game through the lens of a VR headset, which is wild to think about. Overall, It's a very bizarre fan game that I never would have ever imagined being a possibility, but it goes to show the lengths fans would go to make their weird and imaginative ideas come to life. Have you ever woke up one day and thought to yourself, I wish there was a Silent Hill game where you could play as Robbie the Rabbit? No? Well, me neither, but in this Silent Hill fan game, you can do just that. For those who are Robbie the Rabbit purists who love that pink, stuffed plush mascot, you can now play as him. This Silent Hill fan game follows Robbie the Rabbit as he is sent out on a job to do a specific task. As to what that is, well, we don't really know, as the objective is very mysterious. But more on that later. You will find yourself primarily in this hallway with 3 doors leading to each room and 3 tarot cards needed to complete a ritual. In terms of gameplay, there isn't much to gloss over. You mostly just navigate the environment and explore each room, which typically has a puzzle that, if I'm being honest, I had no idea exactly how to solve. Like most Silent Hill puzzles in the games, there are only 2 puzzles, one with this weird amalgamation of a monster hanging upside down, accompanied by 3 other statues. You press this remote, which I'm assuming is required for them to be all facing in a general direction, which then saw me get the tarot card. The other one is a locker combination that I have no idea how I even managed to solve, as I just pressed random numbers on the keypad, and I, out of dumb luck, managed to get the tarot card. The other one is located in this mattress-padded room that weirdly doesn't have a puzzle, just a newspaper to read. After acquiring all 3 tarot cards, you get this cutscene where Robbie the Rabbit finds a gun and a note, transitioning to him walking in Silent Hill in the alleyway where James would find Laura, then taking the subway to Heather's apartment complex. Out of the blue, you hear this ominous and loud gunshot fire in the distance. This implies that Robbie the Rabbit was assigned to assassinate Heather Mason, assumingly, considering the camera shot of her apartment, which is, well, very dark and haunting to think about. But that's about it from this weird and odd Silent Hill fan game. I guess it was cool to play as Robbie the Rabbit, and it does make me think how fun of an idea it would be to have some sort of spin-off where you play as him, even if it is a minigame featuring him and not as the main character. Although dark in its implications, it's still an interesting idea. It manages to tackle the question that I imagine no one had in the back of their mind. What if you could play as Robbie the Rabbit? If there is one thing I love about mods, it's typically combining that mod with a pre-existing game and converging it with a game that has no relation to the franchise whatsoever, and somehow making 2 elements that shouldn't work together end up working. The same could be said with this fan game here, called Silent Hill Abyss Lord. It uses the Wolfenstein 3D engine to combine the likes of Silent Hill 2's atmosphere to create this oddity of a game. In terms of its story, it follows James Sunderland as he explores the holes that he jumps through, ending in a different part of his mind that sees the horrors of the Silent Hill 2 monsters chasing after you to kill you from escaping. It seems to be a running joke in this game about James jumping through holes, which I'm assuming is based on him jumping through the holes from a segment in the later half of the original game. Within this gameplay, it's basically Wolfenstein 3D or Doom in terms of its gameplay design. In these older games, you typically are accompanied by a firearm or a melee weapon, using them against the various enemies scattered across the rooms that you shoot at relentlessly with your guns. Since it's a very old engine, there isn't much depth to the atmosphere due to the limitations of the hardware, having you mostly explore in these box-like rooms. However, given the limitations, it seems that the developer put a lot of thought and effort into making this otherworld design similar to that of Silent Hill 2. We have the lying figures, mannequins, and the nurses. having to combat them with either the pistol or pipe, which, if I'm being honest, I did not find myself using the pipe as I grew attached to the pistol. The pistol is the best weapon, as it has the most damage output and allows for a range between enemies, as they deal surprisingly lots of damage quickly. The enemies aren't difficult per se, they are more of an annoyance as they are large in quantity and move fairly quickly. It's hard to take them seriously as a threat though, because they're rendered in 2D JPEG images that look hilarious to look at as they waddle over to you.
The only me is me.
Over time though, I realized you can just avoid them and collect all the essential items needed to finish the level. There is a nice little tribute when it comes to Silent Hill in terms of references, such as Mary's outfit, which gives you the pipe, a comically large portrait image of Angela, depressed and lying down, the various Robbie the Rabbits you have to shoot and collect to finish the level, I presume. You get the idea. Other than that, that's about it for this game. It's just kind of there, if I'm being honest. It's interesting, to say the least, to see a conversion mod with Wolfenstein 3D or Doom's engine being used as a tribute to Silent Hill 2 as a fan game. Those are two things I never would have possibly imagined being together, yet here we are. Silent Hill: The Pledge has an interesting scenario where you play as the mailman, Howard Blackwood, a recurring character you find within Silent Hill Downpour, who mysteriously appears every now and then when playing as Murphy. Well, in this fan game, we have the ability to assume the role of Howard and play him through his own prequel story. It tells the events of how he found his way to Silent Hill through his perspective. It's in fairness an interesting idea, but so odd of a character to choose to make the main focus, when there is barely any relevancy to his character in Silent Hill Downpour. I even forgot he existed. In this demo, you have to roam around the apartment to find notes that contain hidden clues that correlate to this locker puzzle, which you have to figure out to access a key to unlock the door in front of you, I'm assuming. I say this because the game decided to break and stop functioning for some reason, as I was controlling the mouse cursor during this puzzle. I couldn't pull my mouse cursor to the bottom of the screen as the game wouldn't allow me, and I decided to restart the demo to hopefully counter this issue in the gameplay again. And as luck would have it, I unfortunately, once again, got the same result when trying to solve this locker puzzle. I have no idea as to why this was happening, and so I thought maybe there was an update that maybe solved this bug issue. So I went back to the website, but there are only 3 files on the page to download, and the last time this fan game was updated was over 10 years ago. With this in mind, all hope was lost as I just gave up after this. It's a shame because this seemed to be an interesting premise to explore a mysterious character who could have some spotlight shed on him. Unfortunately, it seems that tale will never unfold. For a bit of a history lesson, Silent Hill: The Escape is a previously seen spin-off in the Silent Hill franchise, primarily released on mobile phones, incorporating first-person shooter gameplay mechanics where you play in a dungeon crawler atmosphere, moving in one of 4 directions as you scale through tight linear hallways in this labyrinth of a maze. The objective is to find keys in these mazes throughout 10 levels while avoiding or killing the monsters to escape. Most of the monsters seen here are iconic figures from the franchise, such as the Bubblehead Nurses, but also never-before-seen monsters, such as these possessed wheelchair apparitions, hanging ceiling creatures, or the stalker enemy that closely resembles that of Pyramid Head. This is by far one of the most obscure Silent Hill games in the franchise, along with many others, which are spin-offs that aren't very well known either, but that's for another day. The point is that Silent Hill: The Escape is an obscure game that graciously got a fan remake for PC. From my understanding, it incorporates all the elements that were comprised in the original mobile game and adapted to the PC, recreated from the ground up, using the keyboard keys to move and the mouse to aim and reload while killing enemies. Surprisingly, it feels very smooth and natural, a quality of life improvement compared to the controls of the original, considering that mobile phones back in the day used buttons that didn't have much versatility when aiming. Here, it feels like a match made in heaven with these mouse and keyboard controls. The environments, while very basic and similar in their structure, still warrant this tension, as most of the time, the atmosphere can be very dark and hollow to where the player cannot see what is in front of them, creating this anxiety for when they do eventually encounter a monster unexpectedly. As I was getting used to the gameplay mechanics and gaining this understanding of finding a key, avoiding anything in my path while running through the corridors in hopes of not encountering an enemy gave me lots of dread and stakes. The idea of incorporating tight linear levels with monsters that build in numbers while having to find a key to escape is very basic in concept that isn't new, but the creation of that build-up is what keeps you compelled to the gameplay, making it worthwhile. And once you do eventually get to the exit, you feel this overwhelming wave of relief. It makes not only good horror, but also good replay value, especially if you want to perfect your overall rank throughout each consecutive level. It's cathartic to believe someone just woke up one day and decided to remake an obscure and forgotten Silent Hill spin-off from a device that was only available to people on those of mobile devices. Ironically, this opportunity for millions to download the game would end up finding out not even knowing of its existence. Regardless, I think it's really cool that fans have either ported or remade these unavailable Silent Hill games to the general public, especially for free. I recommend you check out Silent Hill The Escape fan remake, as it's a good time waster, but a game you can finally experience. One of the many things I've always wanted to do in the Silent Hill games was to have the ability to explore the entire town of Silent Hill. Technically, you have the ability to explore the foggy town that features it in each game. Still, it's very limited due to its draw distance being obscured by its fog, the streets having a vast abyss that forces you to find an alternate path, or the many monsters that plague the city streets of the town itself that you have to fight off or run away from, which disturbs this peace of walking the town at your own leisure. However, this all changed with this fan game called My Silent Walk. That wish to explore Silent Hill without any monsters or obstacles that obstruct our path is now a dream come true. The entire map of Silent Hill from Silent Hill 1 is ported to the Unreal Engine, which removes the fog and the monsters and instead replaces the ominous atmosphere with a more peaceful and relaxing one, with a bright blue sky in the daytime. It weirdly makes the town more alive more than ever. You can see locations such as the Konami Burger, Midwich Elementary, or Cafe 5-2. All locations are familiar to anyone who played this game, albeit unavailable to enter into the interior buildings itself, unfortunately. But still, a spectacle to witness. From just standing on the opposite end of the town and looking at the streets, it's insane to see how long the streets protrude from one end of the town to the other. It gives the town far more depth than initially with the fog. You feel so tiny and vulnerable in comparison with how massive the sheer size of the map is. I found myself lost in exploring everything that I possibly could. That made me giddy, like a little kid on Christmas, getting the present I wanted, that being the ability to explore Silent Hill. There isn't much else in this fan game to do other than to explore the town itself, but the fact that you can do this at your own leisure without the monsters or the fog to limit your exploration is a novelty. I spent a good hour just getting lost in exploring the town of Silent Hill and would have loved to explore other maps featured in the game, or really, exploring other parts of town, like the one from Silent Hill 2. If you wish to explore Silent Hill, then those restless dreams of seeing that town are now a reality. Okay, so I know I will sound like a broken record, because this will be the third time I talk about Silent Hill 1, and I imagine you are sick of it by now. But trust me, I discovered yet another Silent Hill 1 fan remake that is by far the highest in quality when conveying a modern survival horror experience, yet still pays tribute to the direction of the original Silent Hill 1. The many ideas this fan remake does that cement this seamless and engaging experience are a sight to behold, because this is possibly the closest we will ever get to an authentic Silent Hill 1 remake. But before I get ahead of myself, let's take it step by step and walk ourselves through this small demo that presents quite the journey for old veterans of the series and newcomers alike. The intro cutscene is the first difference that is a stark contrast compared to the original. We have an introduction to Harry Mason and his wife, Jodie Mason. It shows them at a gas station, refueling their tank as they head to the town of Silent Hill. Here it gives a bit of character development between the two that gives them more of a fleshed out personality, especially Jodie Mason, as we never see an interaction between her and Harry in the original, only in the opening FMV sequence. The writing here feels genuinely professional and takes close attention to creating an idea of what these two could ideally reflect when having this relationship with each other, that is hard to envision without much material to go off of from the original game. This in turn paints a loving and caring interaction between the two, showing them how much they love each other deeply, as you have to chase after Jodie when she hears a voice calling to her, which happens to be Cheryl. There is a bit of hesitancy on Harry's part when Jodie recommends the idea of having a baby to nurture and take care of. He isn't against the idea, but shows a bit of worry of the thought of such a life-changing event as caring for a child, as any human would come to find with such a responsibility.
Come on, let's head back to the car. I'll drive us to the nearest town and we'll try to sort this out there.
Harry, remember when we were talking about if we ever had children? If it was a girl, the name you liked.
I do. I liked Cheryl.
Cheryl.
This intro paints a well-crafted character development between these two, which is a nice touch that highlights their personalities and humanizes them, shifting 7 years later to the actual original opening, with Harry driving himself and Cheryl in his Jeep Wrangler to the town of Silent Hill. It shows how much of a concerned and humble dad Harry is with his gestures and glances towards Cheryl that is honestly wholesome with their interaction. The event that follows is of course the obligatory car crash where Harry wakes up in Silent Hill. As opposed to the other Silent Hill remake concept demo we took a look at earlier, that didn't allow the player to interact or explore much of the town itself. Here, you are free to do so. As you can see, the developer who created the town itself is absolutely spot on. From the lonely foggy streets to the maze-like town itself, having to navigate through the thick fog while walking aimlessly feels very close to the original. I also love the callback to the fixed camera angles during the shift to the other world while in the back alleys. It's very well done, and fits naturally while still encompassing this modern survival horror gameplay. The build-up leads to Harry being confronted by the Grey Childs and finding himself in Cafe 522, alongside the introduction to Sybil Bennett. It follows closely to the original scripts, but feels more personal given the tone they have when interacting with each other. They act like they should given the situation, and feel faithful to their characters' personalities.
I was on a trip with my daughter, but now she's missing. Have you seen her? She just turned 7 last month. Short black hair, blue dress.
I'm sorry. The only person I've seen in this town has been you.
So, what happened to this place? I mean, where is everyone?
I wish I knew.
From here, you receive the gun Sybil gives you, alongside with a flashlight, health drink, save point, and radio, as well as a little tutorial when it comes to accessing and managing your inventory, leading into combat with the Air Screamer. Admittedly, the combat is very awkward and clunky, odd even, such as when you aim down sights, the camera weirdly zooms into the gun as opposed to showing Harry's body as well. It's awkward to control and a bit difficult to move around. The inventory is also very rough in terms of its UI and presentation compared to the original, which looks more finished and polished, but it gets the job done. The highlight really is the town of Silent Hill itself. You can feel the unsettling nature with the ambience that is present with your exploration throughout navigating the town. It feels close to home, with that fear of exploring the unknown, where you want to understand where you are going and hope you are going in the correct direction, yet subconsciously, you know deep down that you are lost. But it also creates that relaxation in your exploration that gets you lost in this dreamlike atmosphere with the soothing ambience. It's a nice touch that feels close to the original that I love so much. There is the objective of collecting the Eclipse keys to unlock the door that you access with the doghouse key, which also happens to be in the same locations you find in the original. But after finding all of them to access the door to the backyard to progress to Midwich Elementary School, that's unfortunately where the demo comes to an end. But overall, the quality seen in this fan remake was spot on to the original that paid close tribute and attention to the detail, that was faithful enough to honestly feel like a concept of what an actual Silent Hill 1 remake would look like if we got it instead of Silent Hill 2 remake.
And Mr. Mason, I hope you'll find your daughter quickly.
Thanks, officer. Sybil.
One of the most highly appreciated details that come to mind when it comes to any Silent Hill game is without a doubt the atmosphere. You can find yourself in a foggy, desolate town that lies in ruin and without any life, leaving an ominous impression that there is something more going on behind the scenes. If you take a moment to wait and indulge in your surrounding, it can become a haunting one with the lonely feeling you feel, but simultaneously becoming one that is sad and filled with sorrow. Other times, you can go from a dreamlike atmosphere while roaming the town and then suddenly find yourself in a nightmare with an other world that is covered in rust, blood, and monsters that exists in a different reality that should be conceived from a bad dream. It's a subtle change that gives the player no preconceived notion or indication of this shift, which makes it much more effective. The point of highlighting the atmosphere in these games is because of how powerful and dynamic it truly can make a player feel emotionally. Powerful enough to where I want to explore much more of this atmosphere because of how dreamy and haunting it truly can be. Well, luckily for us, we have the opportunity to do so. The Silent Hill level viewer, developed by Gyromancy, allows the player to explore to their heart's content in each level found in Silent Hill 1 with a free roaming camera. This allows you to explore the streets of Silent Hill, the building interiors, and even out-of-bound areas that were unused. This is possible as Gyromancy extracted the original models and exported them to the Unity engine, allowing for a much more in-depth look into areas that caught our attention previously in the original but weren't possible due to limitations. However, that is now realized with the Level Viewer mod. It's such a cathartic feeling to explore every nook and cranny of every level without having to worry about the monsters living around you or inventory management. To make sure you're safe and secured of resources to keep moving forward, you can free roam passively without issue and allow your curiosity to get the best of you. Fun fact, the level viewer has also been an important and useful tool when I capture footage for any of my Silent Hill 1 videos, as it offers a more cinematic experience that wouldn't be possible in the original, thanks to the mod itself. I highly recommend that anyone who is a fan of Silent Hill 1 to check this mod out if they are curious about exploring the town of Silent Hill, the Otherworld, or every level in general and exploring what it has to offer. The difference in a camera perspective can change how the atmosphere of a surrounding can be perceived. Silent Hill 1 uses a dynamic fixed camera angle that is used very strategically in many instances when crafting its scenes, such as the iconic opening where Harry Mason is in the nightmare sequence in the alley. More often than not, it can be behind the player at all times and follow you when exploring the streets of Silent Hill to show how expansive the foggy environment is. However, when it comes to a tight linear setting, it can be used against the player and be an impediment when it comes to your progress. Having to accommodate this lack of foresight in your general location with monsters lurking towards you around every corner without any indication can be easily unsettling and terrifying, given the situation. With how well structured the camera angle is, it can create a scene of horror and other times create a scene that is calm and ambient. As iconic as this camera system is, I often always wondered what Silent Hill would be like in the first-person perspective, as I imagine the horror would only be alleviated to a whole new level, creating an entirely different experience. As of recently, a YouTube user, Mr. Katrina, is currently in the development of recreating Silent Hill 1 from the ground up with an entirely new gameplay system that is focused on capturing Silent Hill in VR, featuring fully functional compatibility with a VR headset and controllers. The gameplay we see in Silent Hill is now adapted to the VR, emulating the Silent Hill experience but through a new lens. It's truly captivating to see how far into development Mr. Katrina has gone when it comes to reinventing a whole new source code that functions with VR compatibility. Not only that, but had to repurpose the original assets and make them functional for this mod, such as emulating Harry Mason's hands, a working handgun, an entirely new combat system, as well as implementing seamless transitions from each room in the game without any loadings. To say that there are lots of ambitions and expectations for what has been laid out so far with only just small teasers of gameplay footage is an understatement, to say the least. There is no definitive release date set just yet, but the progress of ongoing development of the mod can be seen on Mr. Katrina's YouTube channel, which I will put a link in the description for you to check out if you're interested. Needless to say, I'm very excited to try out this VR mod, as I feel like this fits right into that Silent Hill experience but offers a different change in gameplay and atmosphere, which I'm sure we will appreciate when the time comes and we can finally experience it for ourselves. There's a massive amount of work and dedication that it takes for a development team to fully create a seamless and functional experience of a beloved title on older console hardware, to then polish and fine-tune any issues, bugs, or glitches that can prove to leave a sour taste on the experience on modern platforms, for not only old fans but also new fans to re-experience a classic title that should be nothing but playable. Not only did it take a collaborative effort with a group of programmers, modders, and artists who are fans of Silent Hill 2 to come together to make such a port for Silent Hill 2 for PC, but go about this process for free to create what is known as Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition. Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition is deemed as the definitive edition of a remastered port of the original Silent Hill 2 that provides enhancements such as bug fixes or glitches, quality of life improvements to the controls, gameplay, and audio, and restoration to frame rate, FMV videos, images, and much more, offering a plethora of optimization to controller, keypad, and mouse support to PC players. The amount of quality in this unofficial remaster for Silent Hill 2 is nothing short but phenomenal and respectable, as this was done by fans for fans, knowing that there was much more opportunity to fix and improve on a pre-existing port and make it to near perfection. I highly advise anyone who wants to experience the original Silent Hill 2 for the first time to play the Enhanced Edition, as it's the best in terms of experiencing a classic on a modern platform that is convenient, but it also preserves the essence of quality of the original faithfully. Similar to the Enhanced Edition of Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3 also has a mod that enhances the PC version of tweaks and fixes to make a previously unplayable game playable. This mod is an obligation if you want to experience Silent Hill 3 on PC, as running it off just the application alone will make you run into errors, making it unplayable. This mod includes widescreen support, improved flashlight lighting, 60 FPS gameplay, the ability to save at any time during gameplay, restored audio and unused beta sounds, and much more. This also restores little details and perks such as the Silent Hill 2 Easter eggs and all of Heather's 14 outfits that were originally only achievable on the PlayStation 2 version. Furthermore, other mods such as the Audio Enhancement Pack offer uncompressed PS2 audio that is corrected in its music and sound effects, and controller support with an Xbox 360 controller that is compatible as an option if that is more so your preference. A fun little inclusion that the modding community has made over the years is outfit mods for Heather. Such outfits you can install are Heather's movie outfit from Silent Hill Revelation, Heather with her dark natural hair, Cheryl Mason from Silent Hill Shattered Memories, or Memory of Alessa. While this isn't necessarily a mod for the PC version, this is still a mod for the PC SX2 emulator of Silent Hill 3. The shader mod adds lighting to make the environment feel much more vibrant in a bleak and dark atmosphere. While minor, it shows a stark contrast in its detail when compared to the original quality with use of shaders, showing how much of a couple of changes can change the vibe of the gameplay completely. One of my favorite types of mods is undoubtedly randomizer mods. On paper, a randomizer mod randomizes an assortment of items, weapons, and enemy placements that you'd find in gameplay to mix it up in every playthrough, offering the player incentive to try out new scenarios and challenges that weren't possible in the original game. Much of the time, this can make the player start with a weak weapon that offers not much durability nor damage output, and shortly afterward, spawn the hardest enemies seen in the later half of the story, to cause absolute hell and mayhem for you. While this is understandably frustrating and difficult due to its challenging nature, it allows for lots of strategy and planning on the player's part to devise new and unique ways to combat these challenges to progress. I actually played this randomizer mod last year with my stream, and we all had an amazingly fun time with the pure chaos that was derived from the mod itself that was brutal, emotional, and rememberable. I would love to see randomizer mods of other Silent Hill games like Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3, but unfortunately, it seems we have to wait and see if that day comes to fruition. Until then, if you ever want a reason to replay Silent Hill 4 to give yourself a challenge and enjoyable chaotic time, then try out the Silent Hill 4 randomizer mod. Eileen? Oh my god!
Little boy, what are you doing here?
Oh, that's so cursed. Oh no.
Finally, the third revelation.
Oh no. Oh, that's so cursed.
Nosy guy that was here. He said it too. Something big is gonna happen.
Oh, that's so cursed.
Finally, it's gonna happen.
Oh, that's gonna haunt a lot of people's nightmares today. Tonight. Oh, that's so cursed. As I previously mentioned, the use of camera angles and how that can change the gameplay's experience of a simple change in perspective can truly revitalize and give birth to an entirely new experience, offering not only replayability to replay once again, but refill that nostalgia that we felt long ago as if we are re-experiencing that game for the first time once again. Fortunately for us, Zealot Tormunds has made a first-person and third-person over-the-shoulder camera mod for Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, and Silent Hill 4. In the menu of the mod itself, the player is given lots of options to optimize their preferences when it comes to either choosing a first-person or third-person camera, which also adapts to your controller scheme to suit the perspective you are playing in. To say that both first-person and third-person feel so seamless and smooth in this style is mind-blowing. While the fixed dynamic camera angles in the earlier Silent Hill games are iconic and are important when setting up the gameplay and using them to its advantage when providing subtle visual cues to the player, or even working against you, the mod makes the game much more immersive when either in the first-person or third-person camera angle. To go back to these games with a first-person camera angle and become immersed in this perspective whilst you see the events play out, such as the monsters you have to combat, the subtle shift to the other world, and just taking a moment to rest and have yourself listen to the ambience is really something else. Then to have the third-person over-the-shoulder camera angle emulate that modern survival horror gameplay that we've all become accustomed to by now, but just in these older titles, is uncanny, but surprisingly normal and works. What Zealot Tormunds brought for us is something truly remarkable that offers new and creative ways to re-experience those beloved classic titles in an all-new experience in itself, that goes to show how a simple change of a camera angle can recreate something new. One of the biggest missed opportunities was to implement classic outfits as either an optional outfit or as an incentive to have the player unlock outfits for either James or Maria. Something that was actually teased at the player in the story when James and Maria are together but only used as a visual gag and reference. However, I do wish we could have seen Maria in her classic outfit as an option, or restore James with his military patches, which were notably missing. Well, luckily for us, both of these outfits respectively have been restored with mods. It looks complete to see remake Maria in her classic outfit as it complements her sexual and promiscuous personality and character, which was one of the integral aspects of the original. While the patches are a very minor addition, it still feels like a neat detail that is part of James's character. Speaking of outfits, one thing that I find really cool is the classic PlayStation 2 character models of the characters implemented in the remake, such as James Sunderland or Angela Orozco. It would have been a neat and funny unlockable, either DLC or in-game, to see these character models roam the town of Silent Hill for the sake of nostalgia. Speaking of remakes, it's widely known that Silent Hill 2 Remake sold phenomenally well, with well over 2 million units sold worldwide, which would warrant more remakes later down the line. While we wait in anticipation of which Silent Hill would get the remake treatment next, we do get to see a little teaser of what a potential Silent Hill 3 remake could be. This Heather Mason mod is unique as it uses a newly put together model of a Heather Mason with the remake treatment. It looks very well done, and kudos to the modder for using their ideas and creativity to adapt a hypothetical remake version of Heather. One thing I've always wanted to do in each Silent Hill game is have the ability to explore the town of Silent Hill without the fog. The fog makes great use as a backdrop and as a mechanic in the gameplay, obscuring the player's vision and misdirecting them to impede their progress. But I've always longed for the option to explore Silent Hill without the fog itself and see what the once lively town used to look like. With the Sunny Hills mod, we finally had the opportunity to explore the town to our heart's content. It still blows my mind every single time I play Silent Hill 2 Remake with this mod. Without fog and the use of sunlight, which dramatically changes the tone of the atmosphere from a haunting one to a calm and soothing one. It feels like you can explore the everyday town without any fear or danger, and see what life with people used to look like. It makes me wonder if a Silent Hill game could work without the fog itself, and instead, opt for a daylight setting. Maybe one day, that possibility can become a reality.